Hello, my friends. Welcome once again to Kardec Radio, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Spiritism, a closer look. I'm Luiz Lima, your host, and I have a special guest tonight. But first of all, let me just tell you, if you have any questions, any comments, any requests that you want to place for topics that we want to bring over and discuss, you have the information down on your screen. You can just go to kardecradio.com. You can go to our Facebook page, or you can use the email on the bottom of your screen. So tonight, we are going to take a closer look at something very interesting in the very beginning of the Spiritist codification. Tonight, we are going to take a closer look at God and the Supreme Intelligence. Yeah, the very beginning. And I'm going to bring somebody here that's going to help us. That somebody is a special friend. He's been here several times and will be here many more. Mackenzie Melo, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, Luis. Thank you for having me, for inviting me once again. Here I am, around surrounded by my home, by my mess, um, with E, right? It's just different than mess with A. Also, lots of masses around, but yeah, thank you for
And
having me.
surrounded by God, the Supreme Intelligence as well, right?
That's true. Surrounded internally, externally, everywhere, anywhere, anytime. Yeah,
Beautiful. Mackenzie, God and the Supreme Intelligence. There's a lot to be said, I think, but
there
let's try
is,
to
there is. We
get
were.
to the bottom of it as deep as we can today. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I guess this needs to be really a conversation because
Mhm.
ideas will be thrown out, and then we have to pick it up and try to make sense of all the ideas because this is to me is such a philosophical discussion, such a
Mhm.
like
Yes.
like you said. I mean, we need to go deep and deep and deep, and depending on how we look at it, it brings us into different places and different times. So, of course, that the title of what we're going to talk about, God in the Supreme Intelligence, is a play with words on the answer to Kardec's question, or to Kardec's first question on the Spirit's book, which is probably the most well-known question and answer in terms of, not in terms of understanding necessarily, but in terms of I know that this question is at the Spirit's book, right? So is what is God is the very first question. Before that, we have the introduction, the prolegomena, and a lot of other stuff that's necessary. It is very important to read all that before we get to the first question because Kardec spreads out a load full of information that's very important for us to get into the Spiritist philosophy. But when he opens up the book, What is God, right? And I'm going to spend just a few minutes just talking about the
Yeah.
question itself. Not a few minutes, it will be very, very brief.
No,
I
go ahead.
heard some people saying once, they said, oh, Kardec didn't believe in God. He never said, oh, the first question, by the question itself, we don't need to go even further than that. The question itself, he's not asking if God exists. He's not asking there would be a chance that God does not exist. No, he starts by saying God exists. Period.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why the question is what.
It's within the question. Yeah.
It's within the question. The question itself shows that Kardec believes in God. So let's take this out of our discussion here. So what is God? And then God, according to the spirits of the codification, is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. Of course, it was written in French. This is a translation, but this is close enough. And we're not going to talk about the first cause of all things because that's another like big, very big
Right.
discussion. So we're talking about just this first, in English, these first five words. God is the supreme intelligence. So that's why the title is God and the supreme intelligence, because we're going to try to think about what is this supreme intelligence that God really is, right? So, and it's something that we don't understand, apparently, because we don't understand what God is until today. We apparently don't understand what is means to be supreme, and we apparently don't understand what is intelligence. So how do we and why do we answer this question, and we think that we understand the whole thing if we don't understand the pieces? That's something that really like bothers me every time I think about it. Not when people talk about it, but when I think about it, because I try to keep thinking, what is intelligence? What really means to be intelligence? And then we have this full, like a lot of stuff within the codification, within the books themselves. We have stuff in the Genesis, we have stuff here further down in the Spirits book, we have stuff even and I'm saying quote unquote here, because we never think, and that's where I think that we need to start. If I think about intelligence, I think that the last place where I would look for something about intelligence would be in the Gospel according to Spiritism, because we tend to say that the Gospel according to Spiritism talks about the religious aspect. And what does religion has to do with intelligence, right? We see so many people saying that we don't need this, it's just based on faith. Why? So if it's just faith, why do we need intelligence? But one of the very interesting messages about intelligence on the codification is exactly at the center of the codification, which is the Gospel according to Spiritism. We have two books in the beginning, two books in the end, and then we have the book in the middle, which
Right.
is gospel, and then it talks about intelligence in a very, very interesting way.
Yeah, I think there's well, first of all, like you said, right, the question itself is something for up for discussion before the answer. Just God by itself it creates a lot of confusion. I think
Mhm.
different people understand the word God different ways. Different belief systems present God in different ways. So I think there's an attempt here from the spirits to give us a definition of God that is uniform. It's good for everyone, everyone limited to its own understanding, and that definition would still apply. So I think it's such a great, and that's why the three words, right, that we are gonna discuss, they have to be understood, and each person, if it's not understood with the proper depth, each person is gonna, let's say, adapt to its cultural system, to its religious system, and then we're going to have a distorted definition of God. So I think,
That that's true. That's true. And what is interesting, and I remember when you were saying this, I remember one time long ago I was reading this book by a Brazilian author, and he knows Hebrew and the old languages, I mean Aramaic and Hebrew and also Greek, and he made this translation of the Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, right? And then in the Bible, and when he talked, and then he did the translation um, of the Ten Commandments and a lot of other stuff. So in this book, he says something that is always with me. Um, there's when he talks about God, and in a translation, he says something like this. When the Hebrews, they were writing about God, and then they said that God is, and we translate that God is something. But he says in his book, which I find very interesting, at least for a thought-provoking, topic. He says that the best translation of the verb is, in that specific sense where they said it, it's not is, it's will be. And he explains why. He says, God will be what he will be. And then he says, because God will change in our view
Mhm.
when we get older. So, what God was when I was young, God is not anymore when I am old.
Yeah,
Not because God changed,
yeah. We changed our
but
views. Yeah,
because I changed.
because of evolution, either.
Yeah, yeah,
We change. Yeah,
exactly.
that's.
So if we unlimit this by one life, if we make it unlimited, the more we grow, the more we know, the more we evolve, the more God will change. But not because God changed, but because my perception of what God is or will be will change because I
Mhm.
changed and then I see different things, right? So the same way we see things and we see different things by looking at the same place. There's this old saying that says, a man never takes bath at the same river because the man changes and the river changes.
Right. Yeah,
Everything changes.
yeah.
So I never take a second bath at the same river because I change and the river changed. So it's the same kind of concept here. So
Mhm.
what is really God? And what you said is really amazing in that sense because, it's the spirits try to make something wide so that it catches everybody and that we can maybe leave behind some of our differences to find something that we have in common
Mhm. Common ground.
with God, with that in whatever definition I have from God. And he takes out of the question, or the spirits take out of the question, a gender, God's gender. If God is old, if God is young, if God, they take everything out of that.
Mhm.
They go into the abstraction that is an abstraction, but at the same time is something that's close to us, which is intelligence. And we all know, or we think we know, what intelligence is.
Yeah.
And that's the second point of discussion. We already spoke like what almost half of the time about God. And of course we could be
Could be a
spending
lot
a lot
longer.
of
Yeah.
time, talking about this. But this is really just to start the conversation. I was telling Louise right before we started here that myself, I'm talking now about me. Um, we grew up in most of us, I guess, or I assume that most of us grew up talking about God as a He, right? And to me personally, I got much better today. I'm much better than I was a few years ago. I was telling him, but even today, to me, when I go pray and I start by saying God, I always think of because the word in Portuguese, which is my primary language, is God is a male word. So I tend to think that God is a man. But it's not only because of the word, right? It's because of all the images and all the what the culture does to us. So every time I try to pray to God, I try to put the she word there. I mean, I call God Father and Mother so that I can get re educated to get rid of this um, binary idea of female and male in God, which cannot have this binary thing, cannot be neither a woman nor a man. It needs to be something completely out of this. So it is very hard for us to really get a full grasp of this and understand it. So, but if we keep talking about God, we're not going to get to the intelligence, right, Luis?
Let's get to the intelligence. Let me just say this. When you say masculine and feminine, those are related to something material.
Mm,
So if there's anything of masculine or feminine in God, God would be a product of the material principle. That's absurd. So that's
yeah, see, that's good.
that's good. Let's
That's
move
why
on
it's
to.
important to have a host like Luis. The guy just goes like straight and points at the right spot, so that we can move on. So intelligence, right? So
Intelligence.
it's the supreme. So supreme is the top. I mean, we could be discussing supreme too, but that's not the point. So we go God and intelligence. So what is intelligence? And that's the other question. What is intelligence, right? We see, for example, it just came up to my mind because I was talking to this friend of mine today, and he told me that his daughter is in the autistic spectrum, and I didn't know that. He has a 4-year-old daughter, and I have a sister that has a son, and he is also in the autistic spectrum. And it made me think of what's that movie? Rain Man with
Rain Man.
Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise,
Tom
right?
Cruise.
Um, there's this scene in Rain Man where, for whatever reason, they are walking with I think it's I don't know if it's toothpicks or whatever, and then they fall on the ground. And then as soon as they fall on the ground, he looks at it, at the Rain Man, right? The Dustin Hoffman, which he says Rain Man, or he used to say it. And then he looks at those toothpicks, um, and then he says, "Oh, they're up." And then he tells the number, 355,
Right.
whatever is the number is. I can't remember the number. And he said, "Oh, he couldn't have counted those numbers so quickly." Um, is this intelligence? Is this an ability? What is the difference between ability and intelligence, right?
Mhm.
There are so many people that are super intelligent, like that can like create math, solve math problems, and but then you go talk to the person, and the person cannot say a word to two people without getting angry.
Yeah.
Um, and there are people there you can talk to about anything in the world. They will be the most the simplest people in a person in the world. Be able to relate to a lot of people and talk and so on. But you ask a simple question about something bigger, and the person doesn't know. Um, is that person intelligent or not? What do we consider intelligence? Do we consider intelligence, as I was telling Louise? Do we consider it um, me and him as being the idea of a nerd because I have beard and glasses and I look like I am intelligent, and my beard, if I take half of it and put in him, then would be like split, right, in half. I have beard for two people instead of one. Um, but what is intelligence, right? If not the capability, and then just jump in, if not the capability of getting data together, and for data it can be any kind of data. It can be mathematical data, but it can also be wind and temperature data, that not that I rationally think about, but that I feel on my arms. For example, for a golf player that's right there and feel the wind coming in one direction, the person knows instinctively or almost instinctively that that wind have
Have
to
an
make
impact. Yeah.
adjust the what's the name in English? I don't know the names of all the pieces, but of that club
Club.
to hit the ball in the right direction so that the ball can go against the wind in a certain speed and then
Mm.
fall
Yeah.
close to it. That's an intelligence that I don't have.
Right.
Why? Because I don't have the experience, because I didn't study for it, because I didn't try and made some errors and committed errors, and then now I can go back and say, hey, what errors did I make so that I can improve? And intelligence is this idea of improvement, of getting solving problems, and it doesn't matter what types of problems. If
Yeah.
I'm having a problem with Luis and I'm able to solve the problem, me and him, I am intelligent. It may not be seen as intelligence, but this is also intelligence.
Yeah.
So
It's a
the
form of
word it encapsulates one idea that we have, which is not the truth. It's not what the word really is or really means, right, Luis?
Yeah. I think part of the situation here is we tend to understand or to mix intelligence with intellect. And if we subscribe to the idea of intellect, the supreme intellect makes God have a huge, huge, huge brain physical brain. That's another absurd. Of course, that's not the case. So intelligence, in the sense that the spirits, put on the definition, is not intellect. It doesn't have to do with brains and cells and chemistry and energy going through. That's not what it is. And for those of us who still have this idea of intellect, attach the idea of intellect to the definition, it's going to be complicated to understand God.
Yeah, it is, because we take one huge part of what God is. And maybe that's why some people have some problems with this definition of God in the Spirit's book, because it kind of takes from God, or apparently takes from God, one another big definition that we give to God, which is God is love.
Mhm.
Right? So it is as if when we say that God is the supreme intelligence, we're taking out of the equation the loving part of God.
Yeah.
And that's where we said in the beginning that we don't understand what intelligence is.
Right. And that creates a paradox because exactly what you're saying, love and intelligence are part of the same thing. For us, it's not.
Yeah,
Either
exactly.
if you subscribe to the idea of intellect, so intellect is one thing, love is another thing. There is no common ground to both, and God is exactly the other way around.
Yeah. So that's why I think that this conversation is so interesting in that sense, because it can create lots of problems, but not problems in terms of making us go away from God, but creating problems with what we subscribe, like you just said. We subscribe to some ideas. And then because we subscribe to some of these ideas, then we can't get rid of these ideas. Just
Mhm.
like I said in the beginning, or a few minutes ago, when I said that my idea of God is that God is a He. And then to
Yeah,
me, it's very hard to change because I subscribe to the idea that God is a He. And then when I say God, Mother of all things, I said, what? It sounds weird.
yeah, it
It
does.
still sounds weird because I we grew up listening to our Holy Father, right?
Yeah,
It
it's automated in our perispirit.
yeah, it's ingrained. And like you said also when we were talking before, it is apparently it's in our veins. It runs in our blood, and
Right.
not only from this life but from previous lives. So how hard it is for us to detach these ideas, detach the idea of intelligence from intellect. The
Mhm.
only way is for us to repeat to ourselves that there is more than one type of intelligence. And if God is what we call the supreme intelligence, it's not that he is the great thinker or the greatest thinker of the world. He is also the great, we just need to add this. He is also the greatest thinker in the world.
Much more
But
than that too. Much
yeah,
more.
but there's much more than that, because being intelligent is not just being a great thinker. It's also being a great doer. It's great. It's being a great lover. It's being a great whatever we get from virtues. He or she, see, he, right?
Mhm.
God, it's so hard for me, but God is this. It's much more than this. So intelligence. And the first time that I thought about this was uh, um, when I was reading or actually talking to a friend of mine, and she was telling me about her studies on multiple intelligences, which was this theory developed by, I think, Howard Gardner a few years ago. I mean, 20, 25, or 30, more than years ago, saying that uh, the theory of multiple intelligences. And then when I heard this, and then we started talking, and then I made the connection with this question or this answer. God is a supreme intelligence. And then I said, okay, so now it totally changed the way I see this answer. Because it's not, just like Luis said, it's not about intellect. It's about all the intelligences that we have. See, a golfer has an intelligence that I don't have. And in one of these intelligences that Howard Gardner like um, didactically subdivided so that we can understand. Because it's not like as if, oh, I have this intelligence and I have 10% of this. And well, it might be, but it's the idea that we're still not a full body of ourselves. We are growing up in certain areas, and just like, oh, I know a little bit of geography, I know a little bit of history, and the more we know, the more we gather this data and we collect stuff. So if I'm doing exercises, I'm going to start to be smart or intelligent exercise wise, right? I know that if I do this, it's going to be better for this muscle in my arm or for the muscle in my back. But I might know it here, but once I go do it, I don't know. So it means that I'm still not intelligent
Right.
bodily wise, right? So it's this idea that we have this, we can make ourselves, love better, or we can make ourselves. And then there's there was the big book that talked about, in which out of all intelligences was the one that was the most famous, which was the emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
right? Which makes us really connect now. Okay, now we have emotional intelligence and we have, let's say, intellectual intelligence. If God is a supreme intelligence, he's the supreme in emotional and intellectual. And then you have another one, which is the intracommunication, the communication with yourself. God is the supreme of that. Oh, now you have a better communication with other people. God is the supreme of that. So the intelligence that the spirits are talking here, once again, it's not simply limited to one type of intelligence. Whatever the one we want to choose, it's for all intelligences. And I guess that the more we we dive deep into the understanding intelligences, and we didn't even touch in instinct. We didn't even talk about what the Genesis talk a little bit about, or the gospel according to Spiritism. We just like, it's just like small brush strokes on the
Yeah.
topic, so that we can keep thinking about it, and hoping that when we understand that when Jesus says, "You are all gods," he is saying that we have the capability of being, quote unquote, as perfect as our God is, which
Yeah.
is improving ourselves, our intelligences, not just this, but also, as since we put the intelligence here and we put the heart here, right, or the feelings here, so we merge all together. And when we die, we don't have a brain and we don't have a heart. We have all merged into one, and we are intelligent.
Yeah. I wanna just quickly go back to what you said about the intelligence and love, God
Mhm.
being supreme intelligence and supreme love, if you will.
Yeah.
So that gives us a kind of a direction. So love and intelligence, they can't be separated. It's a unity. We just see as two different things because we see intelligence as intellect, but they are not. So it came to me like this: if you want to be intelligent, love more, right? Want
Yeah.
to be more intelligent, love more. That's
Yeah.
a great start.
Yeah, that's a great start. That's right. That's right. And so that I don't go out without any quotes from any spirits book, other than the of course the answer and the question to the go to the in a spirits book. Um, in the message, um, what's the chapter here? I can't remember. Whatever. It says, it's the title of the message, the mission of the intelligent person on earth. It's in the
Mhm.
Gospel according to Spiritism. It says right at the last paragraph. It starts with this, and that's the only sentence I'm going to read. Intelligence holds great riches in future merits, provided it is well employed. And then he's going to talk about being prideful,
Mhm.
which will degrade the intelligence. So it's actually the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah,
If
it
you want to
shadows
be more
intelligence. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So if you want to be more intelligent, love more, meaning be less greedy, less selfish, So that's the sentence I'd like to read here from the Gospel according to Spiritism. So there's much more to this. There's much more. We need to sit down and talk. But I think this is a very good starting point for us to really think about how intelligent we are, how intelligent we want to be, what type of intelligences we want to develop within ourselves, and how do I see God if I
Yeah,
see God.
yeah, like you said, there's a lot more to be discussed, but I think it was great the way you brought it to us, like throwing these little things in the air for us to take tonight to the pillow and start thinking about them every night, because that's the kind of thing we should be doing every night, reflecting upon things like these.
That's
Because
right.
if you can't get past question number one, you still have 1,018 questions to go after that, but you got to pass it with the proper understanding, not
Yes.
with the proper reading. I can read because I know how to read English, but that's a whole different story. We're not talking about reading. We're talking about feeling the meaning,
Exactly.
and not necessarily that's an easy thing. We've been talking for 30 minutes and still not an easy thing.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Mackenzie, thank you so much for the insight, for the input you gave us. And we will be taking this further down the road. You're gonna be joining us a few more times, I'm sure,
All
to
right. Thank
continue
you.
the subject.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you once again. And thank you everybody for watching. And I hope seeing you next time.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We'll be here next Wednesday again, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be well. Thank you.